Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where today I'm going to be talking about another Konica camera. In this case it's going to be the Konica Eye 2, which is a 35mm half frame format released by Konica way back in 1967. For those of you who are new to my channel, I sell vintage Japanese cameras just like this one in my online store, japanvintagecamera.com. I have an Etsy store which is also called Japan Vintage Camera, so if you'd like to buy this Konica or another vintage Japanese camera, please visit one of my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. So before I talk too much about this Konica Eye, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the half frame format in general for those of you who might not be familiar with it. The half-frame format was made popular by Olympus in the late 1950s when Olympus thought it might be a good idea to make a camera more for the Japanese domestic market, a more economical camera which was less expensive and could get more exposures on a regular roll of 35mm film. So they got a new designer, Mr. Yoshihisa Maitani, to design this camera, and it was known as the Pen. And it turned out to be a wildly popular camera and was improved and went through a lot of evolutions over the years. The Pen became the Pen S, became the Pen D, became the Pen E, EE, EE2, EE3, the Pen F, the FT, and so on and so on. A large variety of models of the Pen camera were produced. And it was so popular that, of course, other camera makers jumped onto the half-frame format bandwagon, with Konica being one of them. Now, the advantages, of course, to the half-frame camera is that they can make a more compact camera with less materials and less time to assemble. And also, you can get up to 72 exposures out of a 36 exposure roll of film. It was a really wonderful idea, and apparently it became popular in a lot of other places other than just Japan. Konica kind of got into the half-frame format by not actually building a half-frame format camera. What they did is they took one of their rangefinder cameras, the Konica 3A, which was a late 1950s camera. They added a light meter to it and the capability of shooting half-frame if you used a half-frame insert and mask in the back of the camera. And though it was a wonderful camera for shooting full-frame 35mm film, it wasn't exactly optimal for the half-frame format. And then later on, Konica released its Autorex 35mm SLR camera, which had a half-frame option. There was a switch on the top which allowed you to switch between full-frame and half-frame. And of course, that was also a kind of a large and bulky camera for shooting half-frame photos. And so Konica came out with the original Konica Eye, which was produced a few years before this one. And then, of course, the Eye evolved into the Eye 2, which was an improved variation. The Konica Eye 2 is a very well-made, high-quality camera. I love the fit and finish to it. I love the chrome plating, the leatherette. Everything about this camera speaks of high quality. Much more so than a lot of the later cameras which were produced by the various manufacturers in Japan and America and elsewhere. When the Eye 2 was produced, cameras were still made largely out of metal, usually brass on the top and bottom, which was chrome-plated, and plastic wasn't widely used in their construction yet. Now, this camera, though it is an all-metal camera, it's not especially heavy, but it is heavy enough where it feels like a quality camera. You can probably say, or some of you might think, that this camera looks a little bit like the Konica C35, and the appearance is very similar. And you can see that the Konica C35 borrowed a lot from the design of the Konica Eye series, but they are completely different cameras. The C35 is a full-frame camera, whereas, of course, this is a half-frame camera. And the C35 featured aluminum top and bottom covers rather than the brass, which was used in the Eye series, so it makes these a higher quality camera with a little bit more expensive construction. And these are also more durable than the C35. I really like the C35 for its lightweight, its really good lens, and its great exposure system, but it's somewhat of a fragile camera, and a lot of them that I've come across have bent focusing helicoids and dents on the top and bottom from having been dropped. The Eye series was more durable when it came to being dropped or damaged, and it's much harder to break them. A much higher quality camera. So let's go ahead and get started with take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Eye 2. And we'll go ahead and start at the top here. And on this side here, we have the film rewind lever, and you actuate that by simply popping it up and flipping it over. and there's a black plastic tip which you can grip and hold on to. It's a roller tip, so it makes it really easy to rewind the film. Hidden here underneath the rewind knob is the release button for the back door, and you simply press that downwards to pop open the film door like so. It's a really good system. It's out of the way. You can't accidentally open the film door on this camera like you can with other kinds of cameras. One thing that is missing on this camera is a shoe for mounting a flash. There isn't any anywhere on the camera. That makes the design much cleaner, but of course more difficult to mount a flash. If you want to use a flash, you can use a flash bracket which attaches to the bottom of the camera via the tripod mount socket. And you can attach your flash sync cable here where my finger is pointing. Moving over this side, we have the shutter release button, which accepts a standard cable release. We have the film winding and shutter charging lever here, and we have the film counter dial here, which runs up to 72 exposures. You can usually get maybe 74 or 75 exposures of film out of a 36 exposure roll of film. At least that's what I've been able to get in my own experience. On the back of the camera, we have the viewfinder eyepiece, and this is a nice large eyepiece for a half frame camera. It's because we have indicators inside the viewfinder which you can see. On the left side, as you look through the viewfinder, you will see a focusing scale which changes as you focus the lens. That makes it easy to focus the lens. This is a scale focus camera, not a rangefinder camera. So you kind of just have to get the camera somewhat close and pretty much everything will be in focus. On the other side, we have a readout for the shutter speeds, and when you depress the shutter button with the camera in the auto setting, a needle will move and show you what shutter speed the camera is selecting. And if it selects a kind of a slow shutter speed, that at least lets you know that you should hold the camera more steady when you're taking a shot to avoid any blur or anything like that. It's a wonderful system, and it makes it much easier to use this camera than other cameras where you kind of have to look on the front of the camera for the information. The bottom of the camera, we have the release button. You depress this to rewind the film. Just push it upward and that unlocks the mechanism, and then you can rewind it. A standard 1/4-inch tripod socket. And here we have the door which you open to access the battery chamber. The good thing about this camera is that it uses a standard LR44 or SR44 battery, which you can find for next to nothing on Amazon. You don't need any adapters or anything. These batteries are still available and probably be available for another century or so. So really good feature of this camera. Moving to the front of the camera, we have a couple of controls, actually 3 different controls on the lens. On the base of the lens, where you can see this tab where my finger is running, this is a selector switch for the auto mode, B mode, and also for a range of apertures. When you are firing the camera, simply set it to the auto mode, and the camera will work fine in daylight situations. If you are using a flash gun, the camera will fire at a flash sync speed, and you would program the aperture depending on what the flash recommends. And of course the B is the bulb setting for long timed exposures. Really handy for things like nighttime photography or special effects photography. Next thing we have is the focusing ring, and this one has detents in it for quickly presetting focus. This is a wonderful camera for things like candid or street photography. You can simply preset the focus, and pretty much all you have to do is compose and shoot. And even if you do have to focus, it's very fast and very intuitive, and actually faster than a rangefinder camera because you don't have to fumble and look at the focus the 2 planes together. You can simply click it to the appropriate range or the appropriate indicator inside the viewfinder, and the camera is focused and ready to go. In the front, we have this beautiful 32mm f1.8 hexanon lens. This is a very large and fast lens, very excellent performer, and an improvement over the original 30mm f1.9 lens, which came in the original Konica Eye. We have the light cell meter located in the top here, and we have this ring around the lens which you turn to program the film speed. So when you buy film for this camera and you put it inside, make sure that you set the film speed to match the film which you have loaded in the camera. And you simply turn this dial, and you turn until the number in the window on the bottom matches the number, or I guess the speed of the film you have loaded inside the camera. You can also, a wonderful thing about this system here is being able to use regular filters, and with the eye behind the filter, it will compensate for the filter automatically. Loading the film is very simple. You simply open the film door by pushing the button here, push down the fork here to drop in your 35mm film cartridge, push it back down to lock the cartridge in place so it doesn't fall out, pull the film meter across and feed it into the take-up spool, and then simply wind and fire until the holes in the bottom of the film are being caught by the teeth on the take-up spool. Then close the film door and simply wind and fire until the number 1 shows up in the film counter window and the camera is ready to use. The wonderful thing about these cameras is since it's a half frame format, you only need a very small stroke to wind the film. That makes it very fast compared to a full frame 35mm camera, and that gives this camera another advantage when it comes to stuff like street photography. It's also rather silent operating. You're not going to get a lot of people staring at you if you're out shooting this camera. The noise won't bother anyone. Really great camera. For those of you who want to know who would be suited for a camera like this, this is really good for someone who wants an easy-to-use camera because it is automatic. All you do is simply focus, compose, and shoot, and the camera automatically selects the best aperture and shutter speed for the light conditions. It's also for someone who wants a high-quality camera. This is a much higher quality camera than a lot of the other, or most of the other half-frame cameras which were on the market at the same time. One which doesn't require any special batteries, and one which doesn't have the selenium light meter, which can kind of deteriorate over time, and maybe the accuracy of the meter starts to fail after a while. The good thing about the CDS light meters is as long as you have a good battery in the camera, you'll get a good meter performance. The format, the half-frame format is a really good format for normal snapshot photos, the 4x6 photos, which you see in most old family albums. You've probably seen lots and lots of these when you visit your grandparents' home. It's also surprisingly good for sharing digitally. You might not believe it, but a lot of people are interested in what is called hybrid photography. You take your film to your drugstore or wherever it is you have it developed, and you can usually get the CD or get the negatives scanned onto a memory card, and then you can upload these onto your computer and you can share them digitally, and you can also edit the photos digitally. So you get the resolution and quality of film, but it can be edited digitally rather than having to edit it in an analog style, which is a little bit of a more time-consuming process. So this camera is really wonderful for a lot of different photographic disciplines, but I think it's especially well suited to like street photography or candid photography. Anyway, the battery on my camera here is starting to get a little bit low, and I don't want to get cut off before I finish my video. As I've said in previous videos, I've got more cameras on the way, and I plan to be doing videos about these. If you'd like to see them, please subscribe. I'm always trying to get people interested in film photography and vintage cameras, and if you click the like button, that really helps. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.